Hello everyone and welcome to another Versus video. I'm Brad Nelson, that's Todd Anderson, and today we're bringing back an oldie. A deck.
I wouldn't really call it a goodie, but it's an oldie.
It is an oldie. And I don't really know if it's gonna see any standard play, but I did want to play with it because it has a new card, and we're talking about Red White Devotion, a deck that showed up for a while, good against the aggressive decks, but kind of tapered off at the end of the format due to all of the control decks and the mono black decks and mono blue popping up. So because of Mana Confluence, if the format gets more aggressive, I think this deck is a mainstay. So let's just get into it and start talking about the deck, because things stayed the same, things changed a little bit, and we'll just talk about the big change, which is Eidolon of the Great Revel. Now this card, I feel like, is what Ashley-Lot was trying to do before, is get some damage in, because the deck does have some cheap cards that you could potentially get burned by.
Yeah.
But when your opponent is taking some extra damage from this, that might just be enough for a Fanatic Amogus or Perforos triggers, things like that. And we still have a couple Ashley-Lots, but this was the worst 2-drop in the deck. But I still think there's no rule that says you can only play, 12, because that was all we had access to.
Yeah,
before.
I mean, I agree. I think having more 2-drops, I think, is exactly what this deck wants. Like, you want to be able to turn on Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx on like turn 3 and turn 4 if possible, if you have a Burning Tree Emissary. So, just having more 2-drops seems like a really easy way to do that. I actually really like this guy in decks that can produce a large amount of damage to the opponent, and Fanatic Amogus does exactly that. Your opponent, if they're an aggressive deck, they're going to be taking shocks from their lands, they're going to be taking damage from Mana Confluence, and now if you're on the play and you play Eidolon of Great Revel on 2, they're going to take, 2, 4, 6, sometimes even 8 points of damage just from this guy while they're trying to progress their board and start busting through things like Boros Reckoner. Sure, you're going to take, maybe like 4 to 6 points of damage from this card if it survives, but if that's the case, you're probably going to end up winning because very few of your cards are going to die, and then you're just going to finish them off with Fanatic, Stormbreath Dragon, things like that.
Mortars.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and so we are playing 2 Ashley-Lots to go along with the 2-drops. Deeper in the deck, we have Mizzy Mortars and Chain of the Rocks as our cards that we're going to interact with. Obviously, with Nykthos, we're trying to do a lot of things with mana, where we're casting Perforos and activating it. Monster Scene, the Stormbreath, the turn we play it, played multiple Fanatics, but we also just kick Mortars to get all the early creatures out of the way so our 2-drops then can deal damage. And some Chain of the Rocks just because it's a very efficient card to splash for in this strategy.
Yeah, plus Master Waves is very problematic for this deck.
Yeah.
If you don't have either an Overload Mizzy Mortars or Chain of the Rocks to take care of it, that card is going to beat you if they're able to survive until turn 4. So I think any red deck, if they can splash white, should be playing some number of Chain of the Rocks main deck and sideboard.
Yeah, all right. Well, that's the main. It's not really a surprise deck, so we don't have to go too deep into it. But I'm going to be trying to produce a lot of mana today and play some big spells. But we'll quick take a look at the sideboard, and then we'll move on to battles. So in the sideboard, you see the 4 Fire Drink Crusaders that we've seen before against mono black and control decks. But again, why can't we break the mold? I'm going to bring in the extra 2 Ashley-Lots and go to 16 2-drops against the aggressive matchups, because getting those early creatures is just more important than having Boros Reckoner in my deck.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it does feel strange to have a card like Ashley-Lot in the sideboard. I feel like it's possible, like, if you want to go that route, maybe something just like having Rakdos Cackler as just 6 1-drops on the board to bring in is a little bit better. I do like the damage output from Ashley-Lot, and being able to have First Strike is pretty important in some matchups. So I understand why it's there. So.
I mean, yeah, I have this mostly for the white weenie matchups that it might exist that I don't want the Eidolons. Because they're just going to have a faster clock than me with Brave the Elements.
Sure.
But because of that, we have Anger of the Gods and Chandra. But Anger of the Gods is mostly just one of these catch-alls against these hyper-aggressive decks. It's really hard to play against a deck that can just put a bunch of permanents on the board, Nykthos in big monsters. So you're going to want to progress your board a lot, especially when they play Frostburn weird. But then just having access to Anger of the Gods can just blow them out sometimes. And Chandra is our control card. It also hits cards like Lifebane Zombie. If decks do have a lot of X1s, we can board it in for the +1. But for the most part, this is just a draw engine, just a problematic permanent for decks to deal with.
I mean, I like Chandra a lot.
Yep. Same with the argument that I had about Naya on Monday. I like Glare right now to deal with all of the Oblivion Ring type effects. But in this deck, I don't want it to be a creature. I do want it to be Glare because Elspeth is an issue. Even being able to remove other creatures is more important. And I don't have Domries that are going to flip them over. one Banishing Light and one Deicide, mostly because I want effects that interact that are white, because red doesn't have these effects. I just don't know which ones yet. So these are just going to move around as the format evolves.
Sure, I'm a pretty big fan early in formats of playing a bunch of one-ofs just to see, like, if you draw them, how impactful were they, and then as it progresses, like, you can figure out if you want to play more. So
yeah, and then a third hammer for the control matchups, the more grindy matchups. Hammer in this deck is just bonkers because you have a lot of mana if you ever Nykthos, and being able to not only have all your guys have haste, but to start making 3/3s no matter what is really crucial against decks like blue-white control.
Yep.
But yeah, so that's the deck. The matchup is Junk versus red-white Devotion, and I'm pretty sure Todd's just going to be trying to weather the storm in the early game and then try to dominate in the mid game. So you do have a lot of cards that do.
Yeah, I mean, my goal basically is to just try to kill as many creatures of Braz as I possibly can, and make sure that his Fanatics of Xenagos are not going to be, or sorry, is it Fanatic of Xenagos? No, it's Fanatic of
Mogus.
Mogus is not going to be lethal when the turn it comes into play. I want to make his Nykthos as bad as possible. I want to try to, just stem the bleeding early with things like Corsair Crewfix, Sylvan Caryatid to block his 2-drops, and just go from there. So,
Yeah, I hope you guys enjoy.